Good afternoon and welcome to the Mission Critical Insights series. Today's topic is the convergence of critical infrastructure and artificial intelligence, and our guest today is Malcolm Harkins, who is the Chief Security and Trust Officer at HiddenLayer. He is responsible for enabling client growth and optimal information security infrastructure systems, policies, and processes. He is also the independent board member and advisor of several organizations, including Mission Critical, and he is an executive coach to CISOs and others in a wide variety of information risk roles. Malcolm engages with peers on outreach activities to drive improvements across the world in the understanding of cyber risks and best practices to manage and mitigate those risks. His key areas of focus include the ethics around technology risk, social responsibility, the total cost of controls, and driving more industry accountability. Welcome, Malcolm, and would you like to tell us a little bit more about your previous pedigree and about HiddenLayer?
Yeah, thanks, Drew. It's great to be on. So, for those that don't know me, I real short story, couple decades at Intel, starting in business roles first, and then 22 years ago, give or take a couple weeks, I started running security and business continuity in Intel Corporation's IT organization, following the kind of seminal events at that time, Code Red and NIMDA, early cyber events that had affected Intel, and 9/11, which obviously created some dramatic concerns for not only the United States but for the world. And then I was at Intel for a couple decades, ended up becoming Chief Security and Privacy Officer, overseeing all the typical IT security stuff, but also product security. So all the security development lifecycle and privacy by design for Intel's products and services. Ran corporate emergency operations for large-scale crises and events in the company, and dabbled in a couple other spots. Spent a few years at Cylance as its Chief Security and Trust Officer, and then have dabbled with startups basically since I left Intel. And as you mentioned, I'm at HiddenLayer, which I recently just joined as their Chief Security and Trust Officer.
Thanks. And I think a number of the companies that you worked with, both the startups and otherwise, have been great, and I think your leadership there has been exceptional. For our audience members who are unfamiliar, HiddenLayer is a Gartner-recognized AI application security company and is a provider of security solutions for machine learning algorithms, model, and the data that powers them. It has a first-of-its-kind, non-invasive software approach to observing and securing machine learning, and HiddenLayer helps its community to protect the world's most valuable technologies. Today, I'm sorry, before we jump into the topic, I guess I should mention I'm Drew Spaniel. I'm the founder and director of research for Mission Critical. Mission Critical, if you're unaware, is an organization that facilitates collaboration between academia, industry, and government to develop and disseminate interdisciplinary, peer-reviewed, technical, and non-technical research that is focused on improving critical infrastructure security and resilience. Jumping into a topic that is maybe kind of technical for a number of audience members, but I think for a general audience can be approached in a non-technical way, and is maybe critical to sort of reach that medium between the two. I wanted to talk to you about the convergence of critical infrastructure and artificial intelligence. I know there's a lot of buzz going around in the news and across the pretty much everywhere on the internet in different ways about AI and its ubiquity. I would say within our personal and professional spaces, Americans are kind of inundated by attempts to apply AI to sort of every facet of our daily lives. Do you believe, with all of your experience at a variety of companies and in a lot of different ways, do you believe that AI is more hype, hope, or somewhere in between?
Well, I think it depends. Let's peel the onion on that a little bit. For again, for the non-technical audience that might be listening, AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, in some way, shape, or form has been around now for decades, right? In some various iterations. And even in my history, when I left Intel to go work at Cylance, that was arguably the first cybersecurity company to use artificial intelligence
Right.
and the application of it to help secure companies and prevent the execution of malicious code. And that company was founded, 10, 11 years ago. So it's been around for a while. What has caused what I'll say the explosive growth in people's understanding of artificial intelligence is what occurred, give or take a little bit about a year ago when ChatGPT and OpenAI came out, and these things called large language models that all of a sudden, instead of this artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities being something that highly technical organizations having private models and their private data science teams and all that stuff that has been occurring for a while, all of a sudden exploded. Now everybody could use artificial intelligence, and it was free, and you could go grab data models and you could apply it in these different areas. So that aspect has created what I'll say this tipping point of movement towards AI, movement towards machine learning, and now a pervasive awareness to it that is driving AI to be more than just a tool used in specific areas for specific benefit, to now being a level of approaching ubiquity where it's getting embedded into everything.
And I think that's a great way to phrase it. I think especially within critical infrastructure, AI should be maybe considered as a tool, as you mentioned, whereas I think AI solutions have been suggested to address everything from security to modernization to talent acquisition and retention as sort of the end all be all as a standalone, whole solution. I mean, I guess to kind of, as you mentioned, peel the onion back, because I think this is a very complicated and nuanced and layered topic. Maybe to take it in pieces, what do you see as the most promising or proactive opportunities for AI as a tool rather than a wholesale solution?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of them in a lot of different industries and a lot of different sectors. So I'll give you a few of them, and some of them are actually dated back even a few years ago. So back a few years ago, I think it was IBM, potentially Walmart and stuff. They were starting to do research of how to use artificial intelligence, as well as some other technologies, blockchain and stuff like that, to improve food safety. Because again, think of all the data that might be coming from the slaughterhouse to the truck with the refrigeration unit to the store to the point of sale. You've got all these, different data sources from different companies, different organizations all over. Let's just take the United States, from the
Right.
farm belt to the store and all that. And how do you know the food is safe? Well,
Right.
the food is safe because of the flow of data from either the farm or the slaughterhouse all the way to the point of sale. But you have touch points along the way on the supply chain, so to speak, of going from the farm or the slaughterhouse to the point of sale. And so every point along there, there's a different handler, there's different data. So the data is getting enriched, it's getting changed, it's getting different context. Well, again, if you can use artificial intelligence with all that pipeline of data to start predicting where you might have some food safety issues because there was a delay on a bridge that allowed a truck to sit too long, and the refrigeration kicked off for 2 minutes. You could start doing all that data mapping. You might really be able to predict where you might have a food safety concern. So food safety is a great example of where it could be applied. I was doing some research for a talk I'm doing in a few weeks at the Arizona Cyber Threat Response Association, and I'm talking about AI and some of the things. And again, a couple examples. McKinsey released a study back a couple months ago. Freeport-McMoRan, a mining company based out of Arizona primarily, but has worldwide operations. They did a study and they released that Freeport has seen 1.5 to $2 billion worth of cost avoidance to their business through the use of artificial intelligence, right? You go,
Right.
that's billions of dollars of benefit for stuff they've already done. There's an elevator company, I can't remember the name of it, basically a steel company who manufactures elevators. You know what they've started doing? They've been baking artificial intelligence into elevator operations because you have, billions of people migrating more and more into cities. As you move into cities, you get high rises, right? As you get high rises, you got tens of thousands of people in buildings. Well, they're estimating 30% efficiency in people movement because of improving elevator operations by predicting things using artificial intelligence. So again, right there's a couple examples, right? And then you can just go further into, different aspects of, safety, finance. In the banking world, artificial intelligence is used to spot and detect fraud. Okay, well that's a big benefit and a reduction in organized crime related items. You've got pharmaceuticals using artificial intelligence to predict drug interactions that could harm people, right? So like almost in every sector, there are really substantial benefits that are being derived from AI and can be derived from the use of AI going forward.
I think those are great examples. And I think that kind of leads into my next question, which is for all of those critical infrastructure stakeholders, whether they're on the industry side or in some cases somewhere in within the supply chain or in government, uh, how can, because AI has become such a buzzword and so, there are all of these promises of, potential savings or opportunities, how can stakeholders distinguish which AI solutions are legitimate and they should consider them, and which ones are sort of, silver bullet solutions or empty promises or just hype? Is there any kind of means test that can be, thrown?
Well, this is going to sound like an odd answer. I'm a former finance person, and guess where I started back, 30-ish years ago? In Intel IT as a finance person evaluating the business benefit of certain technology purchases, hardware, software, networking gear, all that type of stuff. For me, go back to the basics. Is there a decent business benefit from the application of artificial intelligence? Yes or no? Two, what's the potential cost of doing that to achieve those benefits? What are the potential risks of doing it to achieve those benefits? What are the what I'll say the various solution approaches? Like we've all know, take I want to improve sales operations. I need a CRM solution. Well, there's a variety of CRM solutions. Okay, well, great. Go evaluate them, figure out what your requirements are, and figure out which are best suited to deliver the result you're looking for. No different for artificial intelligence. And then
Right,
the question just becomes, do you build it or do you buy it? Right.
right.
And so for me, it's no different than any technical solution. And one of the things that I always, we fall into this habit of what I'll call the shiny bauble syndrome, right? Psychologically, we get all excited about these really cool things. And that can kind of, again, getting to your hype, um, the speed with which you want to go do it, the perceived benefits with which you do it. My job as a finance person was to always hear that from the person who was excited about it, but calibrate it to make sure that Intel was actually going to achieve the financial benefit that somebody who had this idea, who was looking at these things, was proposing. It's no different. It didn't matter if it was going from a mainframe to client server computing to the cloud. Didn't matter if it was going from a desktop to a laptop to a mobile phone. To me, it's the same thing. Don't lose the basics. Do the right business analysis, understand the pros and cons of it, make sure that you account for what I'll say the project success factors, right? In terms of the people that need to be on board, the full technology investment, the alignment across the business so that when you take a technology that you hope to be transformative, you can actually deliver that transformative change and the benefit.
I think that's a great response, and I want to pick at the I think that you, it's sort of in your role as finance officer. I think what to maybe uh, pull an insight out of that. I think what you were kind of doing in a sense was dampening expectations down to reality, sort of shoot for the moon but plan to aim in the bushes in a sense. And I think that with AI especially, there are a lot of companies that are doing great work with AI, but I think they, are as well as consumers and other stakeholders who are worried about AI. I think those legitimate AI companies also have a certain battle of their own against, the companies that are just making, wide bombastic promises and things, because it makes it harder for legitimate companies to deliver, realistic expectations and things. And I think that's kind of what you hit on a little bit with your experience in the finance side is,
Marketers will always market a product, and they're going to put an extra level of shine
right,
on something. And our job as buyers, and even if you're the person with the idea who wants to implement it, you're still a buyer. You have, even on the public side. So again, I've come from for-profit entities, but even if I was in a nonprofit or working for state, local, or federal government, I think I have a fiduciary obligation to make sure that the money and resources being spent on something are delivering a result.
right.
And
Eh,
I think that's true of all of us. And I, like you said, I wouldn't say you're right, shoot for the moon, aim for the bushes, but at the same time, in any business investment, again, in any organization, there's variations on the potential return because you're guessing about the future,
right.
right? And for me, doing a financial ROI, there was always a best case, there was a worst case, and what do we think the most likely outcome would be? So that way we could stratify what could be, doing the moonshot versus what could be, a good return, but it might take us more time to actually, deliver that additional benefit because there was unknowns of just the learning of doing something new.
And I think that's sort of a scenario-based planning approach, and I think that's a very responsible way to incorporate emerging technology. Kind of to sort of go to maybe the expectations in a different way. I think within more on the consumer side, but I would argue, a lot within the regulatory space and even some within industry, I think there are concerns over AI leading to scope creep or privacy concerns or even its own security concerns if, there's not security by design built into the AI. Like using your elevator example, I'm sure if I heard that on a number of media networks, the next day there would be articles talking about AI is going to be in elevators and it's going to be, in addition to just using it for the logistics management, AI is going to be scanning you and, collecting all of your visual information. And that might not be, hopefully, not the reason that it's being implemented. But once that additional conversation thread is added, it becomes part of the narrative. And I think that that's, sort of part of the what we're trying to boil down here of a very large issue into something very digestible. So, I guess summarizing, some people have expressed, or most people, I would argue, have expressed a lot of concern over the rush to apply AI. You see pushback in the art community and even some in the technology space. But especially with critical infrastructure, the things that our day-to-day lives depend on, there's a certain level of valid concern. What would you say are the greatest risks that AI adoption poses, and how can critical infrastructure owners and operators, both plan against those risks, but also try to mitigate the risks that they can't um, avoid entirely.
Yeah, so again, I'll start with a really wide angle.
Yeah,
There's also
it's a
a
lot to
risk of
ask.
there's also a risk of not adopting AI.
Right,
Because if your market competitors do and they gain an advantage, all of a sudden now you're disadvantaged.
right,
Again, I'll give a dated example. Think back to 15 plus years ago. There was this big video company called Blockbuster,
yep,
and they had all these stores everywhere, and people would go in and rent movies physically, right? That was a transformative thing versus just going to a movie theater. And all of a sudden you had things like Netflix. Now all of a sudden it was mail order, and then Netflix went to streaming. Where's Blockbuster today? It's
right,
gone. It didn't evolve as technology changed, and they're dead.
right,
Okay. AI, for those that don't figure out how to appropriately adopt it to further their organization and their business, will eventually be dead, because it's going to have that type of an effect. Just like organizations who didn't move onto the internet.
right,
Look at what's happened in retail, physical stores to then online shopping and stuff like that. And look at what's happened to Sears, Kmart, whatever. So you can't ignore it. If you do, you will have generated a systemic and potentially permanent risk of going out of business. So first off, don't ignore it. Figure out what it is and how to apply it in your business, or you might risk your business. Two, then there's the, now that I've decided I'm going to cross the chasm and go do this quote unquote experimental, risky, uncertain thing. Then you got to go, okay, where does artificial intelligence create material risk to the business, to your customers, and potentially to society? Right? No
right,
different than anything. And for me, I always look at materiality, something that would cause an extinction level event, something that would be so impactful that it really hurts. You know, the equivalent of a heart attack, stroke, cancer, right? A twisted ankle, yeah, it hurts, but it's not going to, really hamper me. So really look at where the application of artificial intelligence is creating a material benefit. Now, some of those examples that I've already shared, okay, if Freeport McManaman's getting $1.5 billion to $2 billion worth of profit benefit, well, guess what? If that is breached, subverted, trade secrets are taken out of whatever, automatically there's a material risk, right? So where
right,
you're going to get material benefit, which is where you should focus first, then you have to look at what risk issues get created if the artificial intelligence is compromised, taken over, and then again control for that risk. Now you've mentioned other aspects. Then there's the nefarious use, or what I'll say the slippery slopes of artificial intelligence, surveillance type items, and things that really kind of again get into broader risk concerns that organizations need to be cognizant of, right? Again, if all of a sudden in those elevators you've got cameras and they're using AI to figure out not only how many people are in the elevator and where the elevators are moving, but that Malcolm is in the elevator and he's gonna then go to the third floor because it recognized me as I was walking in. And so you mash up facial recognition with artificial intelligence with operations of elevators for all that efficiency. And then as I walk to the door of where I'm going, the door unlocks because it knows all that stuff and it's predictive where I'm going and all that. That's cool. On the one hand, there's a lot of big brother, what are the privacy implications of this? Am I now a product and maybe the elevator company is going to be selling personal information and basically productize my movements to generate other revenue sources, right? That would be a concern. But then you go, okay, to that elevator company who's doing that, what are your privacy principles?
Right.
How do you protect it? Do you consider personal information as a monetization business model or not? Right? Like I said, there's all these different things that need to be thought through given the context of what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what type of benefit you're trying to derive.
And I think that's a great way to put it. I think to use your shiny bauble analogy, I think a lot of folks are focusing on the shiny bauble aspect, and this is on both sides, both the concern side and the application side, focusing on the shiny bauble, but maybe not putting enough time and thought into sort of those subsequent conversations. Are we monetizing or collecting data? How, what are the implications? Are we secure in our application of this? Or even to your prior point, is this, how we're applying this the best way or the proper way that we need to apply this to optimize our operations?
No, exactly. And there might be other, I'll give you again an example. It was public information that we were starting to do this, though I don't know if the product ever came to market. When I was back at Silence, prior to the BlackBerry acquisition, there was a product effort to create a technology called Persona, using artificial intelligence to figure out if it was Malcolm behind the keyboard. So your
Right.
keystrokes, your mouse movements, and all that type of stuff, right? You go, really, really cool. Because again, if the bad guy can grab your credentials, how else are you going to do some level of validation? So a level of what I'll say biometric related keystrokes, mouth movements, misspellings, pressure on the keyboard, and all that stuff, because I would have a certain way of typing that would be indicative of whether or not that's Malcolm behind the keyboard. Now, as we started doing that effort, we put in place code of conduct for our data scientists. Why? Because we were actually using employee data to gather enough information to help then create the product. And all the employees volunteered. There was some people who couldn't volunteer and in certain locations, just again, given considering the sensitivity. But there was a bunch of things that I worried about. One was with all that data of pressure on keyboard, misspellings, and stuff like that. If you have that data, you could potentially not only use it to validate that's Malcolm behind the keyboard, but start figuring out patterns and go, is Malcolm impaired in some fashion? Has he drank too much? Is he got maybe a medical issue and he's getting Parkinson's, and all of a sudden you start noticing trends that are a little bit different. Well, all of a sudden that data has now potentially context for other things, which wasn't our business
Right.
model. And we needed to make sure that we were not, inferring other things that could then create other risk issues, for anybody, if we brought that product to market, right? So there's a bunch of things that you have to think about as you go do this that cross into the ethics, the responsibilities, the privacies, the what I'll say byproducts,
Right.
and those potential inferences were byproducts of actually trying to do a security thing. But by default of what we were collecting, you could make inferences around a bunch of different things, health, impairment,
And I think that's the nail on the head there is I think when we have a lot of these top conversations around AI or a lot of our technologies, we especially are looking at it from the perspective of, information security, privacy, and things like that, even just technological advancement. But I do think, in a lot of spaces, you have people that their first thought are, privacy concerns or chilling factors, or even just, oh, the sort of the optimization of business. To use your keystroke example, an employee might find that as what's known in the privacy community as a chilling factor, right? I feel like I'm being monitored and that has a psychological impact on me. Whereas certain business managers might say that's great, I can make sure that my employees are hitting a certain number of keystrokes per minute or something. So I think that's where maybe broadening the term scope creep, you kind of hit the nail on the head there, where if within the security space we we, kind of have a grasp of like these are the pros and cons of AI, but there needs to be some kind of discussion about, how do we hand off that conversation to other communities, and or is that even our responsibility? Right?
Well, I think it is. I've always defined my scope, as you know, quite broad: security, privacy, compliance, ethics, social
Right.
responsibility. 'Cause to me, they're all intertwined risk issues. And I'll bring a clearer point to that. For a number of years now, there's been, even going back into the European Union, the European Commission had done publications on responsible AI and stuff, trustworthy, and that's become a buzzword, responsible AI and all that, which is great. The pros of it are it starts to get you to think about those proactive processes up front as you're designing and
Right.
developing and thinking about implementing artificial intelligence. Now, what I can tell you with 100% certainty, though, is that is necessary but not sufficient. You
Right.
can follow all those responsible AI, trustworthy AI type stuff, and do everything great up front. But guess what? As soon as it's live in production, it's learning, it's interactive. And I can tell you, because I know this, and again, without doing an infomercial, HiddenLayer research team has done a lot of things, including showing that the public models that are available that you can go download from a variety of different websites, guess what? Many of them, those models, the data's already been poisoned.
Right.
Many of those models, in some cases, already in what I'll call the gray space of the models, have malicious code embedded in them. And guess what? Your vulnerability scanner, your endpoint control, whether it's CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Silence, all these other controls that we have in our current technology stack do not protect, in almost all cases, the artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities. Why? Because they don't look at them. They
Right.
were developed for other technology purposes. And so, this is where you start getting into, now, if I've done all the things right up front, I've thought about all that stuff, and then I put it into production, I can't rely on my existing controls because it's not providing that real-time runtime protection. It doesn't have the capacity to vulnerability scan the machine learning AI capabilities and then detect abuse, inference, poisoning, all the other different attack vectors that have come out. So we have to do all that great upfront stuff, but then we have to start really making sure that once we deploy it, we're actively protecting it. Because if we're actively getting material benefit, we're actively also creating a potential material risk if we're not providing that protection.
And I think that's a great lead into sort of one of our final questions here, which is how realistic, we already see AI creeping in both in practice through automation and in theory in a number of publications into adversarial models. Um, how realistic do you see the future incorporation of AI into things like APT attacks for sophisticated malware, or even just how compromising or devastating could an attack be from even a lower scale adversary if they, poison a critical AI data set or something?
Yeah, so well, there's two aspects of that. One, the bad guys are already using artificial intelligence
Yep.
to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of their attacks. No different than the security industry has adopted AI to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of security control. So that ship has already sailed and that weaponization has already occurred. Now, let's go to the other thing that you've talked about. There are today already available free tools that anybody can grab that will attack artificial intelligence.
Right.
So we've also, again, continued to make it easy. Think of all the um, vulnerability research tools that are in the traditional stack that people can grab and use for pen testing. Well, guess what? There's free tools that, in essence, pen test and find gaps in artificial intelligence that anybody could use today. I
Right.
mean, a 10-year-old could go grab it and run one of those tools against a banking site that is using AI to mitigate fraud, and then find a vulnerability, and they get past the fraud model, all of a sudden walk out with $100,000, right? I
Right.
mean, a little bit theoretical with that number, but the reality is that can occur, and that is easily available today.
No, but I think that's a valid, sort of insight, because I mean, even if we look at kids kids today, which is not a great saying, but like even for things like the flippers that are going around on TikTok and stuff, that's the whole goal, is automating, and there's a certain value to those, and making pen testing and things like that accessible to a younger audience and getting them interested in things like cybersecurity. But there is a concern with it as AI becomes more accessible, or pen testing tools become more accessible. If people are applying technologies and not modernizing them or updating them or securing them properly, a 10-year-old might be able to, we used to joke that, like, oh, the kid hacker in a movie in like Jurassic Park or War Games, that's, purely movie fiction, but script
I've
kiddies are,
I've
you know,
seen I've seen stuff from security folks, where literally it's like, I'm going to go to this website, grab this tool, I'm going to go to this website, grab this tool,
yeah.
I'm going to go to this website, do these things, and boom, all of a sudden they've found how to poison, how to do an inference attack, how to get past a fraud model on a website,
Yeah,
in
I mean
literally 5 minutes or less.
the device I mentioned here, like it just, I'm not going to do a commercial for them, but it's a fun little thing to poke around with. But like the bigger draw, I think, for younger audiences is I mean, for older audiences, I'm going to say it's basically a Tamagotchi, but for pen testing. Uh, it
But I mean,
gamifies
think
it.
about it. If it's that easy for a 10-year-old to do, think of what organized crime, think of what
Yeah.
a real hacker, think of what a nation state could do.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that it also kind of hits on the hype. Like, it's nothing that a Raspberry Pi or a laptop couldn't do. It's just, it makes it more accessible, and I think that's, in a nutshell, where you're kind of saying, like, AI is gonna, the inevitable flow of technology. Like, it is, you don't have a choice in, do you consider it or not consider it.
Yeah,
It's
it
here.
goes beyond being vulnerable to it's highly exploitable. And depending upon how you're using it, you're generating a level of exposure to material risk, again, to your organization, potentially your customers, particularly if you've embedded AI in something that you're selling or you're leveraging for your customers versus just your internal operations, right? You're starting to potentially risk others. And then
Right.
depending upon the application of it, again, there could be a wider implication in terms of societal risk.
And I think that's a great sort of ending note for. I have one final question here, which sort of ties together the past question we just kind of discussed, and maybe the question before it, especially of, whose responsibility, or how is the shared responsibility to sort of approach AI and interact with AI, which is, do you, with AI where it's at the moment, it's sort of here, but it's still also paradoxically kind of on the horizon. Do you see that this is the time when legislators and regulators need to be focusing on it, or do you think it's, a conversation that, right now it's premature for that conversation? Or, how do you view that regulatory and governance space, so that things are developed securely, but it also doesn't stifle innovation?
Yeah, so perfect question. And again, having grown up in the tech sector, I don't like bad regulation because it stifles
Right.
innovation and that creates problems. Again, let's look at what the White House has done even this year with an executive order, again, trying in the broad sense for cybersecurity, trying to shift the economics towards the people who are creating the technology and operating it, because they're best suited to and they should be best suited to manage and mitigate those risks. One. Two, the executive order that just came out a couple of weeks ago around artificial intelligence that had a bunch of things that I think were embracing the innovation and the potential benefits, but also created direction for NIST and everybody else to put in place some standards, some capabilities that would help guide not only the federal government, but other organizations to do a better job of securing the new capabilities we're creating. Now, there's that side of it. Then there's I'm a creator of AI, I'm an operator of AI. That's a corporate governance issue, no different than the use of any application or technology to create benefit. And with that comes the accountability and responsibility to do it in a way that manages and mitigates risk. Hence the SEC guidelines, again, several weeks ago that came into be, where if you've had an incident and it has a material risk and you're a public company, you have to disclose it to the investors appropriately, as well as have the right governance and forward-looking understanding of risks that could create a material cyber-related incident that, again, shareholders need to be apprised of that, because if they're making an investment decision in you and you have risks that you haven't either understood or intellectually, honestly disclosed to them, then you are potentially misleading and doing fraudulent related items when you look at it from the eyes of what a common investor would consider in terms of knowledge that would cause them to invest or disinvest in your organization. And we've already seen charges being brought against, companies, again, not in the AI space per se, but people that are public companies. They need to think about that, because again, that is now, going to start seeing more and more enforcement activities against organizations, but also the CISOs, if they've somehow mischaracterized or misled their organization and their investors on the reality of risk.
I think that's a great way to encapsulate the conversation, and I want to thank you for your time, Malcolm. I think our series here is called Critical Insights, and I definitely think you kind of elevated the hallmark of that name here. So thank you so much for your time, and I want to thank our audience for watching this video, and I hope they appreciate the discussion.
Thanks, Drew.